ever had a student come to class without wearing pants? I have. Let's talk expectations in the online classroom. So in the first video, I talked about how students are not conditioned really to understand how online educational contexts function. And this is not their fault. They've been doing classroom-based instruction for the most part for the past 12 to 15 years. So they know how to exist in a classroom. They know what to expect. When we move them from the physical face-to-face classroom into the digital classroom, they don't know what to expect anymore. So one of the great things about making our expectations explicit, and even expectations about things that seem like no-brainers, all it does is help our students feel more comfortable and feel like they can be more successful online. It's also going to help you out because you will be able to tell students what you want from them from the get-go. You will not have to play catch-up. Now, pants. You would think that people would wear pants. However, because we're only the top half, some of our students were like, oh, I don't need to wear bottom half, right? I can just do whatever I want. Well, they can't, and you need to tell them that because sometimes people are going to stand up and you're going to be like, ah, why is this happening? That's what happened to me, okay? So you're going to have to start making things explicit that you might assume students would know better about. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that we're taking students from the face-to-face physical classroom setting and putting them back into domestic space. Domestic space has different rules than the classroom. So first and foremost, you need to talk to students explicitly about what you expect them to do in the online classroom setting. When I teach online, I tell students to treat this as if they are going to a face-to-face class. So what does that mean? One, you're going to wear clothes. Okay? I don't care if you just woke up, you're going to be wearing clothes. That's a top and a bottom. And I don't want to see any special parts of you that I wouldn't normally see outside. Okay? That's for everybody's safety and comfort. Number two, make it so that students know you expect them to be sitting up. A lot of times students will be zooming, right? That's the verb, zooming into your discussion section from bed. So how are you going to handle that? If students are on their bed, they're probably going to start being like, well, when I'm in bed, I can recline. And when I'm reclining on bed, I can fall asleep, right? That's a pretty quick little trajectory that I've seen happen over and over again. So how are you going to enforce the fact that students shouldn't be falling asleep during discussion section? Well, tell them, literally, do not lie down. So wear clothes, do not lie down, and stay where you are. I want to be able to see you. Now, obviously, that's going to depend on whether or not the instructor of record for your course wants you to have videos on, and that's something you have to discuss with your fellow TAs and professor. In the classes that I have TA'd with Professor Levy, we require that students, A, communicate through their microphones, and B, have their cameras on in order to count as being present for a discussion section. But we'll get a little bit more into exceptions about that later. So, why is it important that you would sit in your seat? Well, if I were to just, I don't know, get up and walk away, all of a sudden you see this really awkward image of my living room, which I haven't cleaned, and there's a reason for that. But it's not entirely clear to me as the instructor if the student is actually paying attention or if they've left the room, if they're playing, I don't know, a video game, like they have their Switch over there. You really need to be explicit about your expectations. And sometimes it's just saying, hey, it's business as usual. It's just like if you were in a discussion section in class. You don't stand up and touch all the walls or take a walkabout, right, necessarily, in the middle of section. And I don't expect you to do that during online either. So you want to make the kind of obvious things explicit to your students because I promise you they will not have these same assumptions in mind. The other thing that you need to keep in mind for your own expectations is that this is not going to be a sterile experience. You're going to see a lot more about your students and you're going to show them a lot more about yourselves than you're used to doing so. So for example, this is my dirty apartment. We're in the midst of moving. We're in the midst of receiving the most Amazon packages of anyone in this apartment complex. My husband walked by in the beginning of this video. There's going to be a lot more going on that you're going to see that you're not going to expect. So prepare yourself for the unexpected. You're going to see pets. There's going to be so many pets, right? How are you going to respond to that? You're going to see parents. You're going to see roommates. How are you going to handle that? What sorts of space do you want your students to hold for themselves, and what are you going to do when they're unable to do that? Because I'll tell you what, parents don't necessarily care about when their students are in class. If they want to talk to their student, they're going to talk to them. right? How are you going to deal with that? And the other thing is that you're going to be showing them a glimpse into your own world. And what I like to do is to call it out. Like, if my cat wants to come sit in my lap, he's going to come visit. Hey, everybody, this is Bodhi, right? If my husband walks by, like, I'm not going to make a big deal of it. Because the more we make clear to our students that this is, in many ways, a pre-professional environment, however, with some caveats, the more comfortable they're going to feel. The biggest thing that you're probably going to have to deal with is childcare issues. So when I teach online, a lot of times my students have full-time jobs or other obligations that keep them from being able to occupy a seat in what I would call a traditional academic setting. So a big issue with this is childcare, right? Should childcare get in the way of a student accessing their education? I don't think so. And that might be something for you to contend with on your own time. But because pretty much everything is shut down, including schools, you're likely going to see a lot more small children than you normally would. So be prepared. What are your expectations around that? Start thinking about situations that you might not have expected. And in many ways, this is like the most humanities thinking of all. What are the sorts of things that we assume are true about humanities education, and what are we going to do to work through that when we're faced with the unexpected? As I alluded to in my last video, I'm going to encourage you to face this with kindness. So what does kindness look like? Kindness looks like having everybody come to discussion section regardless of who it is. So if you have a student who is a parent of a young child, let them come to class and tell them that. Tell them that before it happens. Say, hey, I expect you to show up on time just like you would in a regular discussion section. I expect you to wear clothes, not lie down, and stay seated like I would in a regular discussion section. And if there's anything that gets in the way of your childcare, bring your kids to class. I don't want that to get in the way of your education. That kindness is going to go really far in getting students to buy into what you're doing. Now, basic expectations that you can hold for your students are pretty simple. I have students show up with headphones, like I have here. I have students know how to mute their microphone. That's going to become very important, and we'll explore this more when I actually show you how to Zoom. And I expect students to have done whatever reading or whatever obligation it is before they come to section, right, for section. A lot of this seems like it shouldn't be spelled out, but the expectations are going to be out the window as soon as you remove those students from the classroom space. So things that you would say like, hey, read the syllabus, that shows you where everything is. Go over that. State that out loud. Hey, I expect you to wear clothing when you come to discussion section. Yes, please state that out loud. Students might not realize, like, hey, just because you're in your bedroom doesn't mean you should be dressed like you would be in your bedroom, right? Carolyn talks all the time to her students about how this is a pre-professional environment and they need to comport themselves as such. I encourage you to do the same thing. Remind them that this is still a college class, that there's still certain expectations and boundaries that we're drawing there. Make sure they know what your expectations are. This is triply, quadruply, infinitely important in this context because the students are going to be worried. They're going to be nervous. Okay? So, make sure you realize the difference between classroom space and domestic space and how this might affect our students. Make explicit the things that we hold implicit. This is good advice for any course, I think, but it's especially true in the online environment. If you see things you don't expect, let them go, right? Or have things in place that you can do to remind students of your expectations without dunking on them in front of their entire class. And then finally, lead with kindness. What are you going to do to set expectations that help enable students to access their education in these unusual times? How are you going to go about making them feel comfortable in a time that is truly uncomfortable, right? You actually hold that power, even though you're a TA, just a TA. You have the ability to make your discussion sections warm and inviting, even though we're kind of in this cold and dislocating space where we're just talking to a camera, okay? So, expect the unexpected. Make your expectations as explicit as possible, even the most simple ones, and lead with kindness. Those are my 3 takeaways of what you can do to make your online discussion section the most positive experience for the next quarter.